natural mean, Susie?
Exactly.
All right.
Misnomer.
Okay,
That's a
so we're
rhetorical
going to say
question.
cheers and welcome to our guest, Hope McIntyre.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome, Hope.
Thank you.
Yes. Hi, Susie. I'm Margot. I know you're
Hello,
sitting a little
hello.
further back
Hi,
on the
Trish.
couch,
I
but
know,
hey, and it's
yeah.
just, that's
Big
well.
cheers.
You know what? It's the show home here at Foxridge. They have a very beautiful couch, and thank you so much to Foxridge Homes. Details make the difference, and Poppy for clothing. So, welcome, Hope.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so girls, just to fill you in a bit, she is, well, the artistic director of Sarasvati Productions and responsible, I'm going to say responsible for creating such a great kind of community, especially in the women's community of arts and culture, writing, directing, acting, and more importantly, giving a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just women anymore, because women is such a bigger title, or it means so much more. So, you know, first of all, there's going to be a lot of, I think, discussion on going further onto what you're doing right now. I love this, the, you know, reconciliation through the arts. Yeah. But anyways, give us a little bit of background on Saras Body and how it was your dream.
Sure. Well, I think what's really exciting is that, you know, when you come out of theater school and you come out of knowing that you want to do something that has a profound impact, you sometimes have to deal with the mainstream, which isn't always open to experimentation and to doing new things. So founding a company was like the ideal way for myself and my colleagues at the time to do the kind of art we wanted to do and push those boundaries. And yeah, I mean, traditionally, when you think of like great playwrights, who do you think of? A lot of men, right? Yeah. So this was our way of being able to open those doors and definitely provide a stage for a great number of people who have such amazing stories that we don't get to hear enough.
Oh, I know. And I mean, well, your major one was, well, Femfest. And, you know, Margot says, oh, yeah, like the vagina monologues are kind of like that.
The first thing that
and
came to mind,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm Susie. I mean, seeing local shows and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's interesting now because being a woman or feminism, what does that mean now? And, you know, how has that expanded? How has that helped us tell our stories more? Or has it made it harder?
I think it's opened it up. Like, what's so cool is, like, when I go back, Femfest started in 2003.
Yeah.
So we just celebrated our 17th year.
Wow.
And
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's a lot, and we've featured hundreds of artists. And at first, yeah, it was very much about like women's stories. But in the last like 6-7 years, like exploring the trans experience and non-binary, we just did an emerging artist project at Femfest, and instead of it just being for young women, it was for anyone who identifies or non-binary, and it just opened up so many ideas and like casting, like why do we only have to play traditionally female roles? Why can't we experiment with, you know, the type of characters we want to play? And yeah, I think there's been a huge journey, and for me it's exciting because then we have a much wider perspective of what it is to be a human being, not just one gender or the other gender, but we get to experience so much more than that.
What were some of the difficulties that you faced in the beginning? Because I remember, because I would be, you know, doing stories with you and you know, Saras Body and, you know, trying to explain and everything like that, and there's this like this little theater group that's bound and determined.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's what it was, very grassroots, and we've tried to keep those community ties, because I think part of the problem is once you become institutionalized, it's harder to have open doors and it's harder to be accessible, and so I think, you know, as I like to say, we're like the little company that could. We just keep trying to reach out to the community, keep trying to look for stories that need to be told, and so the company itself, yeah, we've been around for almost 20 years here in Winnipeg, and we're at a point which is so exciting for me where we're actually beginning a transition process to bring in new leadership, and I've loved being able to mentor like new young women, new artists, and that's the goal, right? Is to get to the point where people can carry on that legacy and do new and more exciting things, right?
Well, congratulations. I mean, you know what? Because sometimes, yeah, you have to hang on. It's your baby, and you know, unfortunately, there's no one to pass the torch on. And you know, quite often, right, the flame flickers out and it dies. But this has so much momentum. I'm just thinking about your last Femfest. you had like interactive theater, which I thought was really cool, you know, because we're going to get to it to our audience too. We do have an audience here, and it's going to be interactive. Yeah, it is. Yes, yeah.
Well, and I think that's the great thing because it's about conversations.
Yeah.
So we
sort of explain that. What is interactive theater for the people who don't know what that means?
It can be a wide variety of things. So one example this year is a piece called Foreign Exchange, where there was only 4 audience participants. And there was $1,000 cash on the table, and the audience interacted with the money, and there was like questions asked of them, an exploration of what does this paper actually mean, right? We value it so much. Like, what is it for you? How much would you pay for your happiness? How much would you pay for your clothing? How much would you pay? And it was just really cool. Audiences came out like looking at money all differently. We had one that was like mother like daughter, and it was actual mothers and daughters on stage being asked questions.
Oh my goodness,
And
that's so cool.
It was so much fun because they would like, you know.
Now, was it scripted or was it like
Not
just
at
kind
all.
of wow?
How did you pick the participants?
Well, we specifically were looking for Indigenous mother and daughter pairs or pairs where the mother had come from elsewhere, so that there was a bit of a, you know, I'm a Canadian, I did not grow up in Canada.
Amazing.
And some of the questions were like, you know, Mom, tell me, you know, what makes you most proud about me? And they didn't know what the questions were. They were in an envelope they opened and asked in the moment.
Very cool.
Wow.
So,
Okay, now I'm
yeah.
sad that I missed that, but okay.
It's an improv component almost, but it's honesty, so it's a little different. Yeah.
Absolutely. And just seeing the reactions.
Yes.
When you're like, oh, I have to answer this.
In front of people?
In
Yeah,
front
strangers?
of people. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, and it's too bad you didn't document it. But I mean, aren't those cool ideas? like really?
Yeah, you
Oh,
could
yeah.
do a
I
whole
love
series
that.
on that. People would
Yeah.
would find that so entertaining. Yeah.
Well, and so another thing that you're working on is a big project. Reconciliation through art.
Yeah.
Or with art.
And it's amazing because I think there's so much talk right now about what reconciliation is. And in fact, the word itself has even been a bit problematic as we've worked with the community and what does it really actually mean in practice? And how do the arts have to be more responsive and open? Because to be honest, we aren't right now. There's not enough diversity in the theater, in film and television, across the board in the entertainment industry. And so we've gone out and worked with Indigenous youth at 7 different organizations. We have a completely Indigenous team overseeing it and taking their stories that will be put on stage outdoors at the Forks in May. And the idea is, if you want to talk about reconciliation, let's ask Indigenous youth what their lives are actually like right now. What are they experiencing? What are the issues that we really need to understand better before we can even talk to them? And there was this one great analogy that a young participant at Children of the Earth shared. He said, you know, right now I feel like it's like you burnt down someone's house and then you decided how to rebuild it for them without even asking them. And that was very profound for us.
said that?
Teenager, yeah.
Wow, that is very deep, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
For a child to have that kind of perspective on what's happening to them versus being a part of the process, right?
It's so interesting to me that you guys are the ones like bringing up these conversations as a theater company. Like I think it's really wonderful. But then what happens from there? Like do you document the type of insights that you guys get, and who are you sharing that information with?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're documenting it and it'll all become a show for people to come and see. And then beyond that, we're trying to create some kind of work plan because most theaters in Canada are struggling with how do we become more inclusive and how do we like let go of those who are in power and open it up to other people. So a lot of it is coming out of this process with recommendations. And we're learning so much about, like, if you want people to participate in theater, you know, you can't expect them to do it the way you've been doing it. And so I think that's the documenting how we change it.
Yeah, where it's that them and us relationship.
Absolutely.
Well, I know I was recently at a show at Prairie Theatre Exchange, and they signed the Indigenous Accord, and they're saying that every season they're going to have one play that is by an Indigenous playwright or about Indigenous culture. And so they just had one recent, not too long ago in Winnipeg, that was really impactful. I saw it and thought it was really great. Way to address like different topics that maybe people aren't as comfortable with, but they did it in a really accessible way. And so I thought that was really great. But so maybe things like that accord are helping people kind of realize they have to do something about it too. You guys seem like you've had this in mind for a long time, though. It's not new.
Yeah, I think, well, but we can always do more and do better. But I think you're right. It's like, it's one thing to sign an accord. It's another thing to actually do something.
Of course.
Yeah, and so it's good that a lot of people are doing that. And yeah, we're doing, just even Wednesday this week, we've got Casey Adams talking at our fundraising event and showing off her visual art. So there's so many amazing artists in the community that we don't even know about.
I know.
Yeah.
And just doing some of the stories with you, and I mean, the interviews. And you're right, it's the kids, but to have an elder sit down and tell her full story to a total stranger, it was like I could not believe that was Betty Ross, or at Children of the Earth.
Betty Ross.
Betty Ross.
She's a residential school survivor, and
she played with or was really close friends with Betty Osborne, and so she was telling me that whole story, and at such a young age, and so clearly and so vividly at age 4, or just a tiny girl, and she was describing it, how she ran out of the home and was hiding in an overturned boat, and then was found and then brought into, the church or wherever, and it's like, then the rest was, unbelievable.
Was her story being taken, basically?
She was taken and then, sent into residential school, but then, and then she was telling how she was treated. It was unbelievable.
But then her healing journey, and it's been great to have you document some of this for us too, because she has talked a lot about how she's now been able to come back to her sense of self, and to have her shared that with the teenagers there at Children of the Earth, like high school, is so important, so that they understand.
And one of the teenagers in his recommendation said that I need more elders. We need more elders in the school to share their stories, because that's the only way, I guess, that they can have a real connection. And it was very, very powerful. And some of those students spoke so well. It was like, my goodness. Well, the one boy, he was on in government or whatever. Yeah.
Marshall's part of youth parliament.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. I said, okay, I'm voting for you. You should be running, because such a clear thought.
Yeah.
And and another fellow that was just finding his story through art, and he's explaining to me what his artwork was, because that was their project, was some sort of art form, and just really riveting stories, and they remember them so well that it's not just something that they're making up or something that they felt that wasn't really, really true stories. So might switch it to the audience here too, now that we're talking about some sort of things. Diane's kind of going, yeah, I don't know, maybe Diane, maybe share with us a little bit about the work that you do, and in this whole kind of healing process, where do we, what more can we do? And Margot, we had this conversation, is like, there's so much information coming in. What is the solution, or is there a solution, or where can we go from here?
Well, I thought the comment that Hope shared about the young person saying, don't rebuild the house for me without asking me, I think that right there just cuts through all of it. And I think that the work that, I work for this thing called the Winnipeg Boldness Project, and we're a social lab. And so what that means is that it's a platform where we're prototyping ideas and prototyping solutions. And how we get to those solutions is by actually talking to the folks that are being challenged, that they get to define what the challenge is, because often others will define what the challenge is, and then we start solving for it, versus folks who are being impacted get to define the challenge, and then they start solving for it, right? And then the rest of us figure out how we can help and how we can ally and what our role is and what's an appropriate role. So that's sort of what at the core of what the Winnipeg Boldness Project is all about. And so we're very often talking about how, again, families that get defined as having a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of assumptions in that, I think. But how are they participating in society? And so there's, usually we go to policy or, economics of a society. But we were very fortunate to run a prototype around participation in the arts. I think probably most Winnipeggers, most Manitobans, most Canadians would understand how important the arts are to our society, to our culture, to our to our light and to our living and to our livelihood. And so, but who, if we take a real hard look at who is participating in the arts, right? A lot of what Hope is saying. And so we were able to work with our families who, again, are typically defined as, having all these challenges. And that's factual. Yes, they do. It's not all that they are. It's half of the story. And so are they participating in the arts scene in Winnipeg? And by and large, no. And so the easy first step is usually, well, here's some free tickets to things. That isn't the only barrier to participation. And so talking to our families, we learned so much about what are all the barriers. And so there are some obvious things like the cost, the transportation, childcare. Many of these things are very expensive once you're even in the venue, whether it's, refreshments or, programs or, the cost of actually being in the venue. And I was really quite impressed with our arts community because many of them stepped up and went, they dealt with all of that. And so they rolled out the red carpet for our families who wouldn't normally have been able to participate without that red carpet experience. But they went further and they started doing workshops. Right? And they started saying, well, here's the behind the scenes. Here's if you want a career in this, like on stage or behind, so there was all this career pathing about if you're interested in this, here's how you would get into this industry. Here's all the different, options around getting into this industry. So, and I think that we also had a major foundation or a corporate organization that had its foundational arm really start to change their funding policy about how they were funding the arts based on what they were learning from our family's experience. Because I think a lot of the charitable aspect of donating to the arts, there is usually some sort of expectation that the arts might, quote unquote, give back based on that receiving of some sort of charitable an amount. And so the easy give back is here's free tickets, right? Yeah. But again, I was just very impressed that our arts community really stepped up. And so in some ways has really now set the bar, right? And so this particular one foundation is saying, well, free tickets might not be the only thing. Can you go a little bit further in that? And I think it's just, again, really being sincere and genuine about, do we want people to participate or not? And in Winnipeg, the numbers, again, I'm an Indigenous First Nations woman, and, the projections of who's going to make up Winnipeg is changing quite rapidly. Mm-hmm. And by and large, the high growth areas in population, those populations are generally, by and large, not participating in the arts right now. Mm-hmm. Wow. So something to think about.
Yeah. No. And so that leaves us with a bigger burden to bear. I mean, of course, I've been in the arts and entertainment or arts and culture with the ballet, and I know that the ballet and the symphony and the opera, right, were always considered. And probably they were the organizations, here's free tickets. And, and hopefully that landscape is changing. I mean, the ballet did do Going Home Star, the ballet that kind of, opened doors, I guess, giving dance a voice on a story too as well. But
I know that Canadian Tire Jumpstart provides grants to families, and the families get to choose where that funding goes to. So it can be for the ballet tights and the ballet, the shoes and the everything. So our school, our dance school, does have and has had for a few years students who've received the grant.
You see that so much in sports, right? Drop off your hockey equipment, your skates,
Yeah. And I think what's been really interesting is as you're saying, Diane, which is so great, that some of these youth just didn't even know that the arts were an option for them. And so Bear, who was one of the ones you were speaking about, he's doing a mural for us for the show in May. So, and we've got Jamie Black mentoring him on how to do that and how to enter. He wants to be an artist, but never having that option open to him. So we have to make sure we're supporting it on all sides, because yes, transportation is a barrier. Having a space to work in is a barrier. Having the tools to work with are barriers.
The attire,
Absolutely.
They're not going to go in their school clothes. They need painting clothes or dance clothes or whatever to participate. Fully participate.
And this actually really goes, beyond the Indigenous community. It goes to all the big, immigrants that are coming in, the big population that really have so much to give and share their stories. And you work with a lot of them too, Hope. Going back, though, in my experience doing these stories as following the project, we were at a place and it was a young guy that wanted to do his interview, and so took him outside, and He wasn't even really talking about his project. He was talking about life and what this being in this little project on Saras Body. He says, wow, this is so cool. He said, I can't believe it. He said, if I wasn't here, he said, I'd be out in the streets, and very bluntly, and saying, I'd be out in the streets selling drugs. He says, yeah. He says, yeah, I haven't lived a great life, but he says, now I can see there's potential. It was amazing. And I said, well, you just even being able to say that, and if you say it, you're going to do it. Yeah, it was, I'll never forget that. And he was just opening up, and then went inside the room or whatever, and there's a poster of different things and sayings, and I think really it looked like feelings that these teenagers that would come to the drop-in center, you know, be just like a group thing, and different sayings. And it was like, what really struck me was one, when I cross the bridge, I feel different. And the bridge was that one on, the Salter Bridge. Because that's what it was. When I cross the Salter Bridge, I feel different.
Those
Meaning that,
testimonials would be so impactful for you. Yeah.
and I was just like, clearly, it was like you and me walking into the next block or to
Right.
another neighborhood,
But
and
it
you
meant
feel
something.
different.
Yeah.
In this day and age,
Yeah.
in 2020 or almost 2020, I was like, wow. But I think it's as much as we feel that we think we know everything and we're well educated and with the internet and we can see everything, I think that's been a real detriment because we haven't talked. We don't really know
Oh yeah, they're huge
what
blind spots.
true
right?
people
Yeah.
are, what their true feelings are going on with. And, you know, I guess, you know, hopefully a project like this just creates some conversation.
Well, and I think that's like coming back to like making sure that we're not speaking for anybody. And I think
Yes.
that's really important. And there's been a lot of, you know, how do we respectfully make sure that we're opening the option up, but not taking someone's, you know, stories. And we've got our Indigenous advisory and exactly what you experience when we go in and we're like, okay, you can share, you can not share, you can choose to create art and not give it to us, you can take it home, you can do whatever you want, but by and large, they're just like, no one's ever asked me before. I want to tell you what I've experienced.
I know. Yeah.
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 I just wanted to add to this discussion because it's great. But I think we talked about reconciliation. It's a big word right now, and trying to create what is it and bring that to life is still work. Senator Sinclair did say, we've shown you the way, or we've shown you the mountain, and now we have to figure out how to climb it, right? And so reconciliation is something we're actively working on every day. And so there is right now a very robust conversation about what is appropriation and what is appropriate, right? And so there's no easy answer to that. I think for me, the answer always sits in relationship. It lives in relationship, and it lives in between our relationship. And so where do we come to with that is sort of the answer. But it's good conversation to have, right? Because I think, when we have the best of intention to showcase and highlight and bring awareness, that sometimes the outcome is we're doing a bit of harm, right? If it's not done in an appropriate way. So, and I think I just wanted to put a fine point, because I think I hear Hope saying it in all kinds of different ways, which really is very heartwarming for me, that people don't and I think maybe if the larger society would really understand that individuals don't participate in the arts because there are structural barriers. It's not because they don't want to, or it's their own individual capacity is preventing them. I think my work in the community has shown that. I mean, I like Pareto's rule. I love those those numbers. But it feels to me like 80% of the time it's because there's a structural barrier versus 20% of the time it might be an individual capacity issue. So, and I see that not only in the arts. I see that in the social issues of the day, environment, justice, education, you name it. That seems to ring true to me. So,
Do you think the arts are going to be the easiest one to maybe have everybody at a level playing field or whatever?
I think,
The soonest?
the arts are a way to start the conversation. That's in my mind my role, the role of Sarasvati, of the arts in general, is okay, we're not going to show you the answers because we don't have them, but let's start a conversation. Let's open the dialogue. Let's inspire. Let's allow you to see another perspective. And so I think the arts have that kind of immediate power to do that. And then very important that we make sure those continued conversations are happening afterwards too, and that we're not just, okay, we did that project, now we move on, but how do we maintain the relationships?
And that'll be true. Well, I can hardly wait to see the outcome come May 2020. It's going to be something kind of, I think, extraordinary. First of its kind, one of a kind, yes, because these pieces will not be recreated.
Right.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Hope.
Thank you.
Hope.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing
Cheers.
that. That was wonderful.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks to Fox Ridge Homes and Poppy Clothing. Hey.